Harry Tracy was a bad man. He was a Northwest outlaw, and a manhunt for him spawned sensational national headlines and thrilling dime novels. To some, he was king of the bandits. To others, he was the spawn of Satan. And still others concluded he was simply a murderous moron. Which was he? The Old West was dying in the early 20th century. It wasn't dead in the Pacific Northwest, where train robbers, highwaymen, and rustlers were still abroad. People seemed to be of two minds about it. Most wanted law and order, yet others seemed to thrill at those who defied the new norms of civilization. The romance of outlaws like Jesse James was alive and well in the titillation that Harry Tracy provided. Perhaps the wildest of the closing chapters of the Old West happened in the summer of 1902 when two robbers, Tracy and his partner in crime, David Merrill, shot their way out of prison in Salem, Oregon, and they disappeared into the Northwest wilds. Tracy became the most famous of the two, in part because not long after their escape, he shot his partner Merrill in the back near Napavine in southwest Washington, and he traveled on alone. Tracy's pedigree was this. He was a troubled lad from Wisconsin who went west, rustled some cattle, and is said to have briefly run with Wyoming's infamous hole-in-the-wall gang of Butch Cassidy fame. He was said to have been a minor flunky, but later accounts inflated his role. Tracy's only real criminal superpower was his knack for breaking out of jails. He did so in Colorado, in Utah, before fleeing to Seattle and then Portland. He and Merrill committed a number of robberies up and down the Pacific coast. The two highwaymen were finally caught and jailed for an attempted robbery in Portland, where they broke out of jail, were captured, and sentenced to long terms in the formidable Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. After a couple of years there, they broke out again with guns someone smuggled to them. From June to early August, Tracy traveled by boat, foot, horse, and who knows what other means as he was chased by sheriffs, police officers, posses, militias, even the National Guard and the U.S. Navy in a 60-day romp across Washington. He took hostages along the way and demanded food, ammunition, and shelter in exchange for not killing folk. Tracy might not have been a particularly successful bandit, but he was brutally dedicated to maintaining his own freedom. There were a number of shootouts when the law got close. He killed 3 lawmen near Bothell who were on his trail. He killed 2 others, including a Seattle policeman in another getaway. The manhunt was front-page news across the country. Tracy's sightings cropped up across the land. He was seen in Idaho, Colorado, Texas, North Dakota, Nebraska. The real Tracy was still in Washington, working his way across the Cascades. He then vanished in the range, canyon, and farm country of eastern Washington, Big Bend country of the Columbia River. Then, one day in early August, a young man named George Goldfinch encountered Tracy on the range and was forced to guide him to the nearest remote ranch. Goldfinch led him to the spread of the 2 Bachelor Eddy brothers located west of Davenport in Lincoln County. Tracy let Goldfinch go on the promise that he wouldn't tell on him. But Goldfinch went to the small town of Creston and telegraphed the local sheriff. A small posse of 5 men was raised. Could this just be another false alarm of the public's overactive imagination? It was not. When the posse arrived, Tracy was spotted. He bolted from a barn and ran behind a large chunk of basalt, now called Tracy Rock, while bullets flew in both directions. He ran toward a barley field and was winged in the leg. He crawled for cover in the field. It turned out he was bleeding to death. An artery had been severed. Despite Tracy's efforts to staunch the flow, he was near his end. When the posse members crept cautiously into the field the next morning, they found Tracy dead. He'd taken his own life with a pistol shot in the head rather than being taken alive. That wasn't the end of the story. His body was an object of public fascination. Photos were taken, a plaster death mask was made, and members of the public broke into the Davenport Undertaker's parlor where Tracy's body was being prepared. They tore off his bloody clothes and ripped clumps of hair from his head for souvenirs, leaving bald patches. He was put in a pine box and shipped back to Oregon for burial. He was unceremoniously buried in the Oregon Penitentiary Cemetery. Tracy's run wasn't quite at an end. The last chapter was further romanticizing of his story. Popular accounts were written and inflated and described him as a man of, quote, reckless bravery and tactful genius, as king of all renowned outlaws in the history of the world, or so wrote dime novelist Harry Hawkeye. The unromantic record, however, reveals a troubled man. A cold-blooded killer, he was involved in the deaths of at least 10 men during his 2 months of freedom. Tracy is not known for robbing banks or trains, but rather he was a petty thief, robbing passengers of one of those newfangled horseless carriage automobiles. He even stuck up a Portland trolley where his only booty was the conductor's watch. Tracy did not gain the legendary status of the James Brothers or the Daltons or Billy the Kid or Butch and Sundance. He's mostly forgotten today, but he was probably as close as the Northwest got to having a Wild West outlaw. And just in time, too. Sticking up horseless carriages and trolleys isn't exactly how we picture the Old West, is it?